Good evening and welcome. This is a regular meeting of the Princeton Planning Board on Thursday, July 18th, 2024. Pursuant to Section 13 of the Open Public Meetings Act, adequate notice of the time and place of this meeting has been given by prominently posting the resolution of regularly scheduled meetings of the Planning Board of Princeton for February 2024 through January 2025. A copy was filed with the Clerk of Princeton on January 8th, 2024. Legal notice on the adoption of said resolution was published in the January 12th, 2024 edition of the Princeton Packet. Notice of this meeting also has been posted to the municipal website, princetonnj.gov/calendar. Notice that all regular and special meetings of the Princeton Planning Board will be held electronically via Zoom, was transmitted to the Princeton Packet and the Times, and was filed with the Clerk of Princeton on Tuesday, January 17th, 2023. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. During hearings on applications for development, members of the public will have an opportunity to comment and ask questions. Public comment is heard by the board after an applicant's representatives have finished their presentations and have been questioned by board members and staff. Those wishing to comment orally should virtually raise your hand by clicking on the reactions button or raise hand icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or if participating by phone, by pressing *9. Oral comments will be taken in the order in which hands were raised. We ask with respect that members of the public express your views in 3 minutes or less. A countdown clock will be used to help speakers keep track of time, and speakers who exceed 3 minutes will be interrupted. Inappropriate public comment containing obscenity, hate speech, or relating to matters not before the board will be muted. Carrie, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Bodikheimer?
Here.
Ms. Capizoli? Here. Mr. Cohen? Mr. McGowan?
Here.
Ms. Nuka?
Here.
Mr. O'Donnell?
Here.
Ms. Perlmutter?
Here.
Ms. Sachs? Mr. Taylor?
Here.
Ms. Wilson Anderson?
Here.
Mrs. Wilson?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Any announcements tonight from staff or members of the board? Seeing none.
Yes.
Oh, excuse me.
Actually, sorry. Yes, Madam Chair. Yesterday, the site plan committee met.
Right.
we were able
Next
to
on the
do-
agenda, subcommittee reports. So I know.
Perfect. Jump the gun.
I know that our committee chair is not with us tonight, and Justin, who might otherwise give the report, is conflicted. So turning to Ian Henderson for a report from the site plan committee.
Sure. Thanks. So the site plan committee met yesterday to discuss 300 Witherspoon Street. So modifications of an approved application were classified as minor, with conditions that are going to be subject to review in the future by the board.
Okay, good. Next up, any other subcommittee reports? I don't think so. Right? Okay. Next up, we have an ordinance referral. This is ordinance 2024-30. This is a redevelopment plan for Princeton Theological Seminary properties, block 3501, lots 25 and 26, and block 36.01, lots 15, 16, and 17. And even though I just had comments in the opening statement, I'd like to jump in before we hear from our planners and offer a warm welcome to Joe Mariziti of Mariziti Falcon. Joe is the planning board's special counsel for redevelopment. He is one of the most skilled and experienced and respected environmental and redevelopment attorneys in New Jersey. He's a leader and driving force in the field, a recipient of awards that recognize not only legal chops and expertise, but also statewide impact, leadership, integrity, and ethics and judgment. So Joe, so glad you're on our side here. I know Joe from, many planning conferences and other We've crossed paths as many of us on the screen probably have. And I just, happy to have you with us tonight, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that kind invitation
Okay.
and invitation.
And after I say a few remarks, and thanks for your patience listening to me, I'll turn to Joe to say a little more about our specific task tonight, and Jim Kyle will then present to the board. Jim is a founding principal of Kyle McManus Associates, a planning firm based in Hopewell. He is Princeton's redevelopment planning consultant and has worked with Princeton Council and municipal staff to create the redevelopment plan. And after Jim's presentation, the board will have a chance to raise questions and discuss what we've seen. And then we'll hear comments from the public on the redevelopment plan's consistency with Princeton's master plan. We'll observe our usual 3-minute limit and ask members of the public to introduce themselves. However, this is not a public hearing, and therefore we will not swear in those who choose to speak. We are hearing comments and not sworn testimony. The public hearing on this plan will happen before council next week, July 22nd. So to members of the public, when the time comes, please understand that the board can only consider comments that relate specifically to consistency of the redevelopment plan with the community master plan. As the planning board is aware, the board is being sued by a local group led by individuals who live right close to the redevelopment area. That's the focus of our ordinance referral tonight. And during public comment, the board will likely hear from residents involved in one way or another with the ongoing litigation, and that is perfectly fine. The fact of the litigation or the threat of further litigation is not at all relevant to our task tonight. We are just considering whether or not the redevelopment plan introduced by council is substantially consistent with Princeton's community master plan and designed to effectuate the plan. Nothing more than that and nothing less. So now I'll turn things over to Joe Mariziti to amplify or expand or correct anything that I have said from a legal perspective. Joe?
No need to correct a thing. Thank you again, Madam Chair. I thought it would be helpful for the board and also for interested residents to just step back a little bit to put in context the role tonight. The redevelopment plan has been referred by the governing body to the planning board for its review in terms of whether it is substantially consistent with the master plan or is designed to effectuate the master plan. That's the focus. A comment about a redevelopment plan. A redevelopment plan under the law only need be an outline of what the concepts are for the redevelopment area. It can be more than that, and this plan is much more than that, is much more thorough. But the redevelopment plan, once adopted, if it is adopted, I don't want to make any presumption about that. Once a redevelopment plan is adopted, the next step is for the negotiation of a redevelopment agreement with a designated redeveloper. That's where all the details of the project, including the design and every aspect of infrastructure and the complete description of the project and a schedule of when things will happen will be fleshed out. So what's before the board tonight is a very consigned and limited task to determine the substantial consistency with the plan. So this is a function that is not typically performed by a planning board. That's why, as the chair said, it's not a hearing. There will not be sworn witnesses. I have advised the board through the chair that there's not a legal requirement to even obtain comment from members of the public, although it is certainly a useful, wise, and appropriate thing to do, and I fully support it, but it is not a legal requirement. The other aspect of this is to understand what happens as a result of your review tonight. You have several choices. You may simply find that the plan is consistent with the master plan, that is the 2003 master plan, or as is stated in the plan before you, the 1996 master plan and the reexamination reports of that plan. And you may find that's consistent. You may find that it's consistent, but nonetheless want to make recommendations to the governing body regarding some aspect of the plan. You may also finally decide that the plan is not consistent or designed to effectuate the redevelopment plan. Draft resolutions for each of those eventualities have been submitted to the chair and to Justin. Then, the role of the governing body is interesting because the final decision with respect to the adoption of the plan is solely and completely in the hands of the governing body, the elected officials. So the governing body may hear from you, if I'll take the extreme case, that the plan is not consistent with the master plans that I've mentioned. The governing body may nonetheless adopt the plan, even if you conclude that it's not consistent, as long as they do so by a majority of the full membership of the governing body. That's one requirement. And the other one is that they must set forth their reasons in the redevelopment plan for proceeding despite the recommendation from the planning board that it's inconsistent. The action with respect to the adoption of the planning of the plan by the governing body is by ordinance. So the ordinance has been introduced and then it's been referred to the planning board. The governing body cannot act on the adoption of the ordinance until one of two things happens. It gets your response or 45 days passes. So it's entirely possible that a planning board commenting or reviewing a referred development plan may never comment on it, and the governing body may then proceed. I know that in this case, there's a meeting scheduled for next week by the governing body to have the second reading on the ordinance, and at that time, there will be a legally required opportunity for the governing body to hear from anyone wishing to make a comment. So the proceedings tonight, just to summarize, are confined to a very limited issue. No testimony will be given in the normal sense, no sworn witnesses, and no cross-examination. And unless there are any questions, I'll just stop right there.
Any questions for Joe? All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Mariziti.
Thank you.
Let's see, Justin, anything from you before I turn to Jim Kyle? I know Justin sent a brief memo. I don't mean to put you on the spot, Justin. I know our presentation tonight is from Jim Kyle, but anything you want to say first?
Nope, nothing really, Madam Chair. Thank you, though. Just that I put that kind of cover page memo together to introduce Jim Kyle. And if we could hear it from the horse's mouth, we might as well. So with that being said, I'll turn it over to Jim.
Okay, great. Jim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Do I have the
I'm sorry, just
Sure.
before you start.
Yeah.
Just for the benefit of the public, there are 37 people in the attendees room. Quite a few of them may be here for the application that's on the agenda for later on. But I expect that most are interested in this particular issue. So go ahead, Jim. Thanks.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt.
Not a problem. Do I have the ability to share screen? I have a brief presentation that I want to put up and talk through with the board and the public.
It's
Good.
ready for share.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so Tonight, we're here to review the redevelopment plan for Princeton Theological Seminary properties. This was submitted to the governing body for consideration. It was dated July 1st. And I just want to run through a couple of things here. So as Joe mentioned, there are really two statutes that we're operating under here. And the board's function, the first one comes out of New Jersey's local redevelopment and housing law. That's NJSA 40A 12A-7E. And it just simply states that prior to the adoption of a redevelopment plan, the planning board shall transmit to the governing body within 45 days of referral a report containing its recommendation concerning the redevelopment plan. This report shall include an identification of any provisions in the proposed redevelopment plan which are inconsistent with the master plan, and recommendations concerning these inconsistencies and any other matters as the board deems appropriate. So not only are we reviewing the provisions of the master plan and the redevelopment plan, but if the board had other comments deemed appropriate related to standards in the plan, you could provide that as well. The redevelopment law also in subsection D of this same section 7 requires that all provisions of the redevelopment plan shall be either substantially consistent with the municipal master plan or designed to effectuate the master plan. There's also a similar requirement in the municipal land use law. Prior to the adoption of a development regulation, you're essentially doing the same thing. This is section 26A of the municipal land use law. So mirrors this requirement. The only difference here really is that the referral period is 35 days instead of 45. So just a brief summary of the redevelopment process related to this particular property. This commenced back in June of 2018 when mayor and council authorized this planning board to conduct a preliminary investigation. That was conducted in September of 2018. LRK prepared a report that was submitted to the board and reviewed at a public hearing. And the board concluded on September 27th that the criteria under the redevelopment law were met for all parcels. Subsequent to that, mayor and council designated this as a non-condemnation area in need of redevelopment in October of 2018. After that, the redevelopment process kind of stalled a bit. It was picked up in the beginning of 2023. That's when our office was retained to assist with the creation of a redevelopment plan. We had 3 community roundtables in conjunction with this. 2 were held, one in March of 2023, the other in May. And then there was a third held in October of 2023 where the public got to see the concept plans presented by Herring Properties, who's the contract purchaser of the property. So over the last 8 months or so, roughly since that October 23 community roundtable, we've taken all the comments into consideration. So there were a number of comments that were provided at all 3 roundtables, particularly at the third, where the public was finally able to see the concept plans. We've also worked in consultation with municipal staff and had discussions with the contract purchaser as well that resulted in the creation of this redevelopment plan. So it was introduced on July 10th. It's ordinance 2024-30. And as was stated, the public hearing is scheduled for next week, July 22nd. So I just want to offer a brief summary of the redevelopment plan. This is applicable to block 3501, lots 25 and 26, as well as block 3601, lots 15, 16, and 17. It's just under 5 acres in total, and this was the former tenant Roberts Whiteley campus of the Princeton Theological Seminary. And this redevelopment plan and the corresponding ordinance would supersede the underlying E4B zoning requirements. So as far as permitted uses, the plan permits multifamily buildings on block 3501, lots 25 and 26, and block 3601, lots 16 and 17. It also permits single-family detached dwellings on block 3601, lot 15. That is the lot that is located easternmost that fronts on Edge Hill Street. And a total of 238 units are permitted. 20% of those units have to be affordable and meet affordable housing requirements. The existing residents at 92 Stockton Street would remain on lot 15, and 2 additional single-family detached dwellings are also permitted. So the total number of units, including the existing single-family, would be 241. Redevelopment plan sets forth both bulk standards, design criteria. So as far as the kind of the overarching bulk standards, intensity controls, maximum building coverage is permitted at 50%. Maximum impervious coverage is permitted at 75%. There were a number of setback standards that were developed for adjacent properties as well as street frontages. Those are also listed in the redevelopment plan. Maximum building height is 4 stories and 56 feet. Now, the 56 is measured from average finished grade, but no individual facade is allowed to be 50 feet, higher than 50 feet from the adjacent finished grade. There are step backs that are required above 3rd stories, and those are for areas facing existing single family to the south and also to Edge Hill Street. And there's some graphics in the redevelopment plan, figure 17, 18, and 19, that depict those required setbacks from streets and properties, but also shows the intention with the step backs of the 4th story. The maximum building height for lot 15 with the single family detached is 3 stories and 40 feet. And then the minimum required parking in the redevelopment plan area is 1.1 spaces per unit. There will also be EV parking required, consistent with the municipal land use law requirements as well. There's a number of design criteria. Access is very tightly defined. So for lots 25 and 26, those are the lots to the west of Hibben Road. There's going to be a driveway. It has to be at least 125 feet from Stockton Street or Route 206. Access for lots 16 and 17 has to be from Stockton Street. It's anticipated there will be a central circulation drive that extends from Stockton Street down and provides access to the new buildings. And access for lot 15 is intended to be through lots 16 and 17, but the plan does allow it to be from Edge Hill Street. There cannot be access to the rest of the project from Edge Hill Street. Parking is intended to be under buildings. There is a surface parking lot that's permitted on lot 15, and there are a number of open spaces that are required, one along Stockton Street and the other along Hibben Road, both on lot 17. Lighting is per the existing municipal code. There are requirements for preservation of existing trees within public right-of-ways and also within the plan area. There's a number of sustainability features that are encouraged in the in the redevelopment plan. There was a long list of features that were intended to be utilized through this development. And there's also a requirement for a multi-use path along Stockton Street. So as we discussed this and looked at pedestrian connectivity to the downtown and perhaps future intentions with Route 206, we put in a requirement that a wider than a typical sidewalk at say 4 feet, a multi-use path be put in along Stockton Street along the frontage of the redevelopment plan area. So, as has been indicated, the board's function tonight is really to judge whether the redevelopment plan that has been introduced is in any way inconsistent with the community master plan. The redevelopment plan has a number of goals. I'm not going to read through every one of them, but they were, generally smart growth principles, provide higher density compact development close to the downtown, new opportunity for multifamily housing, including affordable housing, increasing the supply of affordable housing on the west side of the downtown, and enhance the view shed along Stockton Street. As has been talked about for decades, that is really one of the key gateways into Princeton, into the downtown. And the idea is to enhance that through this redevelopment process. We also want to try to improve safety and visibility around the redevelopment plan area. One very lengthy discussion that occurred over the last 8 months was related to stormwater management. Currently, the site had no stormwater management features or stormwater control. Obviously, most of this site drains downhill into the neighborhood. So it was very important that we put in standards that would require enhanced stormwater management and really address a lot of that and the use of green infrastructure as well. Obviously, we're adjacent to single family neighborhoods here. We want to make sure that we're providing an appropriate transition from this proposed redevelopment plan area to those single family neighborhoods. And then we also want to have high quality design through the planning process. So I did review the 2023 master plan that the board adopted at the end of the year. Some of the master plan goals that I believe are promoted through this redevelopment plan are listed here. The first is providing for a broad variety of, and again, these aren't verbatim from the master plan. These were kind of paraphrased a little bit, but provide for a broad variety of housing, including affordable housing. One of the key elements for those that are familiar with the municipal settlement with Fair Share Housing Center and the housing plan that was created was the former borough and the former township were kept separate. The borough has its own unmet need component. It was 195 units at one point. It may have been reduced slightly over the last couple of years. But there was a very important court case in Madison that said when circumstances change, you're not necessarily given full protection and immunity. You have to consider those changed circumstances and plan for it, particularly if you're a community that has a significant unmet need, as the former borough does. So this plan will provide for a total of 48 affordable housing units at this site. Again, the set aside is 20%. Welcoming new residential growth that will infuse new life into the downtown. As we talked about at the community roundtables, this site is within about a 10 to 12-minute walk to the core of the downtown, so it's certainly walkable. It's not part of the downtown proper, but it surrounds the downtown and is an important element and gateway, as we discussed. Addressing Princeton's current housing shortage. This will provide, as we've talked about, an additional 238 multifamily units here to help address that. Removing barriers to increase residential density. There was discussion in the master plan, particularly about increasing densities surrounding the downtown and in the downtown. This site also has reasonable access to the Dinky. There's a NJ Transit bus stop that is immediately out in front of the site as well. So that all helps in removing those barriers to increase density. Focusing higher residential density within and around the downtown. That was specifically discussed in the 2023 master plan. Reducing stormwater runoff and flood risk. As I said, we did spend an awful lot of time talking about how we can implement these new green infrastructure requirements and really address flooding that has occurred from this site in the past. Guiding growth away from natural resources. Obviously, here in this case, we're located near the downtown. There really are no sensitive environmental features, floodplains, wetlands, large forested areas, things like that. Those are primarily found in other areas of the municipality and well away from this site. Preserving and enhancing existing visual resources. This kind of goes along with the gateway concept. The concept plan that we saw at the third community roundtable detailed the efforts to improve that gateway into Princeton coming up 206 from the south. There's a requirement, as I said, for open space to be provided up along Stockton Street that is part of that gateway. So that will help enhance that gateway that, as I said, has been discussed for decades. Integrating open space into private development. Again, as I said, there are 2 open spaces that are required to be provided as part of the redevelopment plan. There were sizes specified in the redevelopment plan for those, which will essentially be parks as part of the private development. And then promoting smart growth, sustainability, and resilient development. So a lot of the time that we spent in the first 2 community roundtables was diving into these issues of smart growth, sustainability, and resiliency. Given the location of this in close proximity to the downtown, access to transit, it'll be a walkable environment. Those all promote smart growth principles and sustainability, reducing vehicle miles traveled, reducing the need for vehicles to be utilized, all part of smart growth and sustainability. We also looked at the provisions of the 1996 master plan. As many of you know that have been involved in Princeton for a while, that master plan had much more broad principles and goals. The new master plan, the 2023, really did a great job of defining specific goals and objectives. Not that the 96 plan didn't, but it was much more broad in terms of the goals and objectives. Now here, this redevelopment plan and looking at the 1996 master plan, it'll advance Princeton's housing objectives that were identified at that time. Even back in 1996, there was discussion about, lack of vacant land, developable land, the need for more affordable housing options, and the need for housing in general, particularly for those of low and moderate income. It also provides that in a location that's within walking distance to retail services and educational facilities. So we did provide design guidelines in the plan that ensure that the development that results will be compatible with the historic character of the surrounding neighborhood. So a portion of lot 15 is located in the historic district, but the balance of the site is not. We want to make sure through the redevelopment plan that we're respecting that historic character and providing development that's compatible with it. And that was consistent with the 96 master plan. There was also discussion in that master plan, particularly also in the historic preservation plan element of that master plan, that talked about reinforcing the gateway concept. And we're doing that here through appropriate development and building design standards. Hopefully that was brief enough, and hopefully covered all the parts that we need to. Madam Chair, I'm here. I'm happy to answer any questions the board may have about the plan itself or any of the items of consistency that I just reviewed.
Okay, thank you. Are there questions for Mr. Kyle from board members? Any comments people want to make before we hear from the public? Okay, seeing none. There are now 41 people in the attendees room. And I see that people are starting to raise their hands. So if you would like to address the board, it's a reminder that we have a 3-minute time frame for that. Now is the time to raise your hand, and we will take comments in the order in which hands are raised. So, Carrie, are you bringing over the first?
Karen O'Connell
speaker?
is, I am bringing over Karen O'Connor
Okay,
and then Mike Head. Okay. Sorry.
And excuse me, Madam Chair, I believe we're having an issue with our timer tonight. So
okay.
rather than see it on the screen, we could go to Plan B, which is Ian can time it on his phone and then raise his virtual hand when we get to the 3-minute mark.
Okay. Maybe raise his virtual hand when we get to the 2 minutes and 45 seconds point, so that, whoever is speaking has a little bit of a heads up. Welcome, Ms. O'Connell.
Hi, I'm ready to go.
Just state your name for the record and spell your last name, please.
Okay, I'm Karen O'Connell, and my last name is spelled O''Connell.
Great. Go right ahead.
Okay. This redevelopment plan is in direct opposition to the new master plan. It's the opposite of your goals to grow Princeton responsibly, incrementally, and equitably, recognizing the importance of fit and scale. You are being asked to approve something that goes against everything you worked for and promised us. There is nothing in the master plan that proposes or recommends redevelopment on this massive scale. Before the planning board votes, I urge you to consider the precedent it sets and the damage it will do, and then vote according to the master plan. Here's 4 of the master plan's principles and how this redevelopment doesn't meet them. 1, the master plan envisions gentle infill in areas that are walkable to downtown. There are 6 homes on Hibben Road, each with about 100 years old, on a total of about 4 acres. The proposal will add 238 more dwellings on an equivalent amount of property, all uphill. Its density is 50 units per acre, and when we currently have about 1.5 units per acre. The height of the buildings at 50 feet, not including roof line, will tower over us and our Edge Hill neighbors, especially with the added 261 ground floor garage spaces below the buildings, which are inexplicably not accounted for in the height calculations. The parking alone is about half the size of the municipal garage. 2, the master plan has no mandate or recommendation to change the character of our neighborhoods, but to instead allow more of what already exists. This redevelopment plan is monumentally out of place with the character of our neighborhood, swallowing it with its size and scale and slaughtering all the old growth trees. It is the direct opposite of allowing more development of what already exists. There is nothing as tall or dense as this in all of Princeton. It's twice the size of the Alice in a smaller footprint. The proposal of regrading alone will ruin our neighborhood, lifting one side of Hibben higher than the other and making the drop down to our homes even steeper. 3, the master plan places high value on maintaining Princeton's historic charm. This plan does not honor historic neighborhoods nor Princeton's charm. It will build out the entirety of the TRW properties and encroach on the 200-year-old homes in the Mercer Hill Historic District, one being the oldest in all of Princeton. The viewscape and sense of place will be lost or irreparably changed. 4, green as you go. This redevelopment is the direct opposite of protecting and expanding tree canopy, something critical to public health and climate resiliency. This plan will contribute to the rising urban heat island effect. The property will go from 0% impervious today to, quote, 70% impervious. The new road that will run the entire length of the property is not considered impervious, but will add more to the UHI effect. We are essentially going from a park-like environment to a giant urban heat island. It is not making the built environment greener or more absorbent. It is not retrofitting urban areas to accommodate more green infrastructure. It is not protecting trees whenever and wherever possible. I would like to also address the issue of flooding and how it was mitigated when the historic TR buildings came down, how we live in fear of massive flooding with the potential clear cutting of all trees uphill from us. But
Ms. O'Connell?
I've run out of time.
You have, but I will put a pin in the questions related to the height calculations and grading, the trees and stormwater. Okay, so we will come back to those issues before the night is done.
Okay, thank you, Louise.
Thank you.
Chairperson.
And the next person to speak is Mike Head and then Tom Pinio.
Mr. Head, if you could activate your camera and unmute yourself.
Yeah,
Great.
regular Zoom, in fact, yeah.
State your name for the record and spell your last name.
Mike Head, H-E-A-D.
Great, thank you. Go right ahead.
Okay. If I may, I'd like to start by going back to the night of November 30th. Chairperson Wilson, you responded to a letter from the school board, and you made a statement which I believe went on the record. And I'd just like to repeat that just to remind everybody what was said. And you stated, the plan does not envision or lay a foundation for new housing, such as the developments you referenced, that is the school, the Avalon on the Witherspoon and Merwick Stanworth neighborhoods. Nor does it envision or recommend the kind of scale of court-mandated housing currently being built in proximity to the shopping centre. Today, the planning board is reviewing a proposal against a proposed zoning in the master plan that calls a residential zoned area a multifamily zone, when such a thing was explicitly ruled out as even existed. I believe the gentleman that was presenting the plan called it E4B as the underlying zoning. Actually, that underlying plot had two zonings. It was a zone 3 or zone 4, depending on whether it's educational or residential. The residential standard for residential building is the one we believe should apply, which is zone 3. If I may go back to the statement, you went on to say the land use recommendation in the plans are conservative, based almost entirely on existing zoning in residential neighborhoods, and with the explicit direction that, quoting from the plan, the development of zoning regulations warrants a detailed review of the spatial standards in each district to provide the most appropriate standards for each zone, and that Princeton should, quote, require special and form-based standards that provide a framework for successful integration of new development within the scale and form of existing residential neighborhoods. Clearly, this proposed development fails all these guidelines espoused. and does not under any circumstances comply with a project that is integrated within the scale and form of the existing residential neighbourhoods. As proposed, it will overwhelm a residential district. It's a very dated approach, and it's going to exacerbate many negative environmental issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Head.
Madam Chair, if I could just jump in real quick, we have the timer
Sure.
up and running. It's in the upper
Oh,
right
great.
corner of your screen for you and members of the public that are speaking.
Okay.
And it actually gives a little notice when it's hit the 3-minute mark.
Okay. Thank you. Who is next?
The next person is Tom Pinio, and then Carolyn Clevey, I believe.
Mr.
Good
Pena,
evening.
welcome.
Good evening.
If you could state your name for the record and spell your last name, and then you can jump right in.
Sure. Tom Pineo, Pinneo. I live on Van Devener Avenue. I've been a resident of Princeton for 45 years. I'm a builder, I'm a developer, but it's as a housing and climate advocate and board chair of housing initiatives of Princeton that I speak in support of this plan tonight. The question before us is whether this redevelopment plan is consistent with the master plan. And the answer is, of course, yes. It's a piece of an overall puzzle that uses smart growth principles to, as the planning director's memo states, provide for a broad variety of housing, including affordable housing, welcome new residential growth that will infuse new life into the downtown, address Princeton's current housing shortage, remove barriers to increase residential density, and focus that density within and around the downtown. At the intersection of a housing crisis and climate crisis, we've got to build more in-town housing in communities where people want to live. Places of opportunity like Princeton are precisely where we should be investing in housing and catalyzing social mobility. Inclusionary or set-aside development like that proposed for the TRW site is the best vehicle for that investment, one that doesn't further stratify or segregate the town, and one that leans on the developer and much needed market rate housing to pay for affordable housing. Choosing in-town density over car-centered housing at the periphery will have consequences that we shouldn't gloss over. Those consequences, however, are not excuses not to move forward. We need to acknowledge that the immediate neighbors will feel the disruption and change most acutely. Not to do so would be disingenuous. But we also need to reaffirm that while we are each residents of an individual neighborhood, we are all collectively citizens of Princeton and responsible for the town as a whole. And so, as I have said before, I suggest that those of us who support this plan engage productively in the process to make it even better. It's even more important that those who don't yet support the plan do exactly the same. We have a hometown contract purchaser, born and bred, ready to engage in productive conversation, and we ought to make the very most of it. Let's endeavor to hammer out our redevelopment agreement that is a model for what's possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pinio.
Okay, the next person is Caroline Cleves, and then Joe Butler.
Hi, I'm Caroline Cleves, and I live at 7 Edge Hill Street, and I'm very happy to follow our previous speaker. I also, like Jamie Herring, grew up in Princeton. I'm a native Princetonian, and I am probably also one of the very few people on this call tonight who has been a resident of Princeton Community Housing. And I feel like that's important to say because I know that this neighborhood has been accused of NIMBYism. And so my comments really have to do with the master plans identifying the need for more housing for the missing middle and for low-income residents. my concern is that there's nothing about this proposed redevelopment that addresses the needs of a real middle-class family. According to the interview Mr. Herring gave on October 23rd of 2023 to Planet Princeton, the market rate for a 2-bedroom apartment will be in the high 3,000s a month, and a 2-bedroom with a den will go in the low 4,000s a month. Now, according to like the standard rule of the 30% unit for rent, this requires a family to have a joint income of $180,000 a year. And I can tell you, as somebody who previously lived in community housing, there wasn't a single one of my neighbors who was earning that kind of money, even when there were both parents working. Understandably, these are the free market rate. I don't know if $180,000 for a family is really what Princeton considers the missing middle. I would venture to guess it's not. And as for the issue of the state mandated community housing units, it's my understanding that these units are being given to the municipality on a 40-year term. And I don't know if that's been revised or if that is something that's up for negotiation. It seems to me like a very bad faith effort to sell this enormous development to us is something that's going to have short-term implications for low-income housing in Princeton. And it defies any kind of really long-term multi-generational planning for this town, that those units would convert back to market rate after 40 years. I think it's an embarrassment, and I think it's a bunch of marketing, and there's not a lot of substance to it. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you, Ms. Cleaves. Appreciate it. And we will come back later on to that question of the 40-year sunset. I'm curious about that myself. Next up, Carrie?
That
Joe
would be
Butler?
Joe Butler and then Felicia Spitz.
Okay. Ms. Butler, state your name for the record and then go right ahead.
Joe Butler, B-U-T-L-E-R. Thank you very much. And Louise, thank you very much for your opening comments. I really do appreciate it, even though it's cut into my 3 minutes. This plan is not compatible with the goals outlined in the mobility section of the master plan. Compare Figure 3, the Google aerial photo of the plan, to Figure 12 supplied by the developer, which is inaccurate in really important ways. The Google map correctly identifies north, and from this map, you can see accurately the large curve on Stockton that hinders safe sightlines at Hibben, Campbellton, and Edge Hill. In addition to poor sightlines, Hibben does not meet Stockton at 90 degrees, which makes the turn on or off Stockton challenging. A second crosswalk is completely inappropriate. By cropping and shifting the map and misidentifying north, the developer obscures important safety concerns for drivers, pedestrians, and cyclists. The supposed open spaces at the corners are actually required sightlines, which means no trees, no shrubs, or furniture. On page 19, I don't see a definition for a central circulation drive in the RSIS. I do see a cul-de-sac. Based on the projections, this development would exceed the maximum allowable ADTs for this type of roadway. It isn't safe to put that much traffic on this type of road, crisscrossing a sidewalk and adding to the congestion on one of the town's 2 principal arterials. It violates the mobility hierarchy outlined in 3.1. There are 6 driveways on Hibben and 12 drivers. 100% of the adults on Hibben have a car. This isn't a walkable neighborhood to groceries, to pharmacy, to schools, or even to the train station. Adding a new curb cut and access to parking for 40 vehicles on this street will increase traffic on this local street by over 300%. Hibben and Edge Hill both have speed pillows currently. In the street hierarchy, these are local streets, and yet we are already inundated with cut-through traffic. You can limit parking spaces, but you won't limit the need for vehicles, Ubers, Amazon, UPS, and Grubhub. All this before we deal with the traffic that will be driven up and down these side streets by drivers who will use them to avoid making left-hand turns on and off Stockton. Vision 0 in the master plan calls for increasing safety for all residents through improved design. This isn't it. Also, page 19, last sentence is inaccurate. There is parking on Hibben unless they're planning on taking away our parking along with our privacy. Mobility 3.3, 6 of the 10 identified focus intersections are within a mile of here. 3 of the focus corridors 206, Mercer, and Nassau all meet 2 blocks from here. 2 of the 6, 206 and Mercer, are directly linked to this project. This development will make traffic appreciably worse on these corridors and intersections and make residents less safe. I'm disappointed there isn't a topographical map included in this packet so everyone can understand just how enormous in scale this project will be. This is in complete contrast to the compact village quality described in the Horace Historic Preservation element for the inner gateway. To use the word urban is completely out of context and misleading. They never intended to have the W Hotel plunked down in a totally residential neighborhood. I want to reiterate that this is not an educational use and the comparison ought to be R3. We may
Ms.
have
Butler, your time's up. In conclusion?
Well, yes. Thank you again for your time and thank you for your opening comments. And I just want to say that there are a lot of sleight of hands in this packet and in this ordinance. And we're residents and taxpayers. We're not the enemy. And as Tom Pinio said, we all want to engage on this in a fair way, but having unbiased material is a start. Thank you.
Thank you. Are you bringing over Ms. Spitz?
Yes,
Okay.
Felicia Spitz.
And a reminder to other people who wish to address the board that right now is the time to raise your hand virtually by clicking on the icon at the bottom of your screen. Okay. Ms. Spitz, welcome.
Thank you. It's Felicia Spitz, S-P-I-T-Z. I'm really upset with Mr. Pinio because he said everything that I wanted to say. So I'm gonna have to ad-lib it. I'm here not only as a resident who lives in the Institute neighborhood, which I consider the western section of Princeton, but also as the chairwoman of Princeton Housing Authority. I also wanted to ask a question. My understanding is this is an area in need of redevelopment, and therefore it gets different consideration than strictly master plan.
Well, it has to be consistent with the master plan, but it does give the council flexibility and latitude for working with the landowner and developer on specific designs that can deviate from the underlying zoning.
Okay, thank you. I also just wanted to comment that I feel like since the buildings have been demoed, we've forgotten a couple things. There used to be over 100 units of housing already there that were accommodated. I heard somebody mention height. There's a 12-story apartment building in Princeton, for those of you who don't know it. It's called the Lawrence Apartments. It's right next to one of our properties, Karen Court. So it's well under what the local units are. And the other thing I wanted to address is that the federal government actually sets what the small area fair market rate rents are. I don't have any opportunity to text you that link, but it's on the HUD website. So this idea that Mr. Herring is somehow proposing extraordinarily high rents and trying to pass them off as middle income is just false. You can blame that on the federal government. I really hope that people engage here because Princeton needs to be a town where everyone can afford to live. I have 6 kids and only one of them, and not the one with the graduate degree, could possibly afford to live here. And it's very upsetting because he's the one that has my grandchild. And I think that we all need to take a step back and look at who Princeton really serves. And is that the kind of community we want to be a part of? And that does mean that we might have to change our view and our sidewalks and the way we conduct ourselves. But it's really important. Princeton hasn't meaningfully changed in probably 50 years. And that's not a flex, as my 15-year-old would say. It needs to change. We need to accommodate everybody from all walks of life and all socioeconomic backgrounds. So I know that this job takes courage, and I hope you all and the town council find the courage to further this plan, because it's really important and we need this housing. Thank you.
Thank you. So we
Uh,
have,
Yeah, two more people just raised their hand. We have Sean Wilentz and Rob.
okay, bring over Mr. Wilentz and then we'll hear from Rob after him. I'm going to say one more time, if you want to address the board, please raise your hand now. Mr. Wilentz, have you activated your camera? I'm not seeing.
Yes, you will.
There we go.
There we are. You see me now?
Well, you're coming in and out.
I'm very dark too.
Wait,
There we
there
are.
you go. We do
Hello,
see you now,
everybody.
yes.
Very good. Nice to see you, Madam Chairman. My name is Sean Wilentz, Wilentz, and I live at 7 Edge Hill Street. And I just wanted to talk about the master plan and the appeal to the idea that we are all Princeton. And I agree with that. I think we are all Princeton. The problem with this is that it's going to destroy this plan, this proposal rather. Not only is it at variance with the master plan, but precisely because it's the variance of the master plan, for all the reasons that people have said, it will actually throw an arrow into the heart of what makes Princeton the place that everybody likes to live in. It is going to completely undo an historic district. It is going to completely destroy it. The idea that, I mean, with all due respects, the idea that Lawrence Apartments can be compared to what is going to happen here, Lawrence Apartments has nothing to do with this neighborhood. It's very far away. So all I want to say is that I see this as actually a patriotic Princeton act. That in fact, we're keeping Princeton closer to what people want it to be as a community. It's not about a neighborhood, it's about the whole place. And if this is undone, if this neighborhood is undone in quite this way, this historic district, that will undo Princeton in fundamental ways. I'll just leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Wilentz. Bring over the person identified only as Rob. And then we have two other people whose hands who have raised their
yes.
hands.
Charles Skinner would be after him.
Okay. And then Jane McLennan.
I'm sorry, my camera is broken. Is it okay if I speak without a camera? My name is Rob Robertson, and I live on 28 Mercer Street. I'm very sorry, but my camera is broken.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. That's all right. Go ahead, Mr. Roberts.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so I live around a few blocks away from this proposed project. It does seem like a massive scale for this historic neighborhood. I wanted to comment on the master plan section related to historic gateways. So I'm looking at the document I'm looking at is the master plan, page 203, Appendix D, Part 2 about historic gateways. So I think we should all know that this is, I think it's the King's Highway, originally a Lenni Lenape trail going through, eventually became Highway 206. This is one of the very significant gateways into town. This would be considered in the zone of being an inner gateway. So the notable inner gateways include this area coming in on Stockton, also Alexander Road, where it meets Mercer Street, and also Jugtown, where we've also seen a great amount of recent activity and discussion related to very aggressive development plans. So in the Jugtown case, there's, I think, here on the call should probably be aware of the controversy and the plans to put a very, very significant development on that gateway. On the Alexander Road gateway, there's a pending proposal from the seminary to replace a huge amount of historical material on 5 properties there. The one property at the top of the street, 44 Mercer, has already been stripped of all of its historic siding and windows. And now we have this project on possibly the grandest and most important gateway into town, which is on a scale which I think some other folks who've spoken also said It really has nothing to do with the context of this neighborhood of special part of Princeton. I'm fully in favor of affordable housing and trying to, service the missing middle and make Princeton, a prosperous and healthy, diverse community for all of us. Just the scale of this and the potential damage it could cause to what makes Princeton seem to be a price too high to pay. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Robertson.
Okay, the next person is Charles Skinner and then Jane McClellan.
Hello, can you see me?
Thank you.
Yes, we can. Just,
Good.
state your name for the record and then you can begin your remarks.
Okay, I'm Charles Skinner, S-K-I-N-N-E-R, and a resident of Princeton. And I would like to add my voice to all of the people who have voiced serious objections to this development plan. It really does not follow the master plan. Another thing not discussed so far is the new school students that this will bring into town will overwhelm the school system. And this area in need of redevelopment also lays open the opportunity for pilots, which means that the developers will evade property taxes and increase the tax burden on the rest of the Princeton residents. Let's see, and also I think particularly the public safety aspects and cutting down the trees. This will change the character of Princeton from the small town that we all love and turn it into something more akin to New Brunswick. There is no way that Princeton can accommodate all of the people that would like to live here. This is kind of a vain hope, and to have a development that's officially 80% unaffordable, it just makes a mockery of the whole process. Anyway, I just want to register my objection, and I'll stop here.
Thank you, Mr. Skinner. I do want members of the public and remind the board that we can never make decisions based on impact on schools. It's just not permitted. So I'm not saying that as any kind of a smackdown. I'm just pointing it out. Mr. Skinner also mentioned or questioned the designation of the site as an area in need of redevelopment. That goes back several years as Mr. Kyle reviewed, and also is not a matter that's before us tonight. So we have, I think, next, but the couple of other issues Mr. McClellan raised, including the trees and anyway, one other thing that he mentioned, I do want to put a pin in and come back to. I think we have 2 more speakers at this point. Again, if you want to speak, now is the time to raise your hand. Carrie, would you bring over Jane McClellan and then Rose? Hi, Ms. McClellan, you just need to unmute yourself.
Thank you.
Sure, state your name for the record and then you can dive right in.
All right, thank you. My name is Jane McClellan. I live on Edge Hill Street in Princeton. The 2023 master plan for Princeton is facing criticism for not adequately safeguarding historic homes and properties. This includes significant residences on Edge Hill and Hibben Road. Concerns have been heightened by the recent council approval for the new construction on the former tenant Roberts Whiteley property, currently owned by Princeton Theological Seminary, suggesting a potential trend toward development that could compromise the historic character of these areas as well as other areas in town. The proposed development, which includes 238 residential units, and I realize I'm saying what others have already mentioned. At a density of 49 units per acre and 262 parking spaces, has raised significant concerns among neighbors. The ingress and egress will be limited to one road, with most parking spaces being underground. The 4-story large-scale project is seen as a threat to the right of homeowner to quiet enjoyment of their property, a basic principle of property law that protects against disturbances like excessive noise, air, and light pollution. The complex housing of at least 500 occupants adjacent to the historic areas without a substantial buffer zone will overwhelm these areas. The 4-story buildings, which will be situated on a hill, are not only expected to negatively affect the quality of life for nearby residents, but also potentially harm the structural integrity of early 19th century homes and Princeton's oldest residents built in the late 1600s. Additionally, the master plan does not adequately protect against loss of tree canopy, the increase of impervious surfaces, and the resultant environmental impact during a time of significant ecological changes. For other Princeton residents, please pay attention to this proposed urbanization of the town. If the planning board can approve such a massive structure in the middle of an historic neighborhood and along one of Princeton's 4 gateways, it can happen anywhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McLennan.
Okay, I had already moved Rose over, so if she could put on her video, that'd be great.
Right, Rose, if you can activate your camera and unmute yourself. There we go.
Good evening.
Good evening. Can you state your full name for the record and spell your last name?
Yes, it's Rose Alexander, Alexander.
Thank you.
My name is my name is Rose, and I live at 124 Mercer Street. And I'd like to address 4 concerns that I have with the proposed large building project and redevelopment of the property on Route 206 adjoining Hibben and Edgehill Streets. First, our traffic and safety concerns. Existing traffic is already congested on every road surrounding the designated 238 unit proposal. Frequently, traffic comes to a halt on both 206 and Mercer Street. And this volume of traffic endangers walkers, runners, and bikers in our area. We know a man whose brother was struck by a vehicle and killed recently on our street. Additional special walks to the Einstein House are now hazardous, and this increased traffic and the hurried drivers make entrances and exits from residents on our streets more dangerous. This 238 apartment proposal will add even more cars, making the current problem much worse. Secondly, the environmental impact. The removal of trees and green cover due to the proposed apartment complex will adversely impact the environment of this historic community. We and some of our neighbors have the Frog Hollow stream under our homes. This project can cause structural damage to our homes if the local ecosystem is disrupted, not to mention impacting wildlife in the area. Higher traffic density will also worsen the air quality index, which is already frequently very high in the community. Also, preserving our precious green space for the future for residents and visitors, especially close to town, is imperative. We are fortunate to live in a beautiful community which has made smart choices and should learn from the experience of other overdeveloped communities before it is too late. Third, privacy and quality of life. The proposed 238 unit complex will reduce privacy for residents in their current homes. This, as well as the permanently increased congestion and noise, will certainly impact quality of life in the area as soon as the construction begins. And fourth, and lastly, tourism and community identity. I would like to emphasize the historical significance of the area. I would like us to advocate responsible growth that respects the community's heritage and architectural character. We should not rush an important decision that may irreparably damage this historic community, which is one of the most beautiful in the United States. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next person to speak is Jessica Vieira.
Hi there. I'm not sure if you can hear me and see me.
We certainly can. We can hear you and see you.
Okay.
If you'll state your name
Great.
for the record and then go right ahead.
Sure. My name is Jessica Vieira, V as in Victor, I-E-I-R-A. I live on Stockton Street at the corner of Edge Hill. I can't stress enough the concerns that have already been raised, but in particular, I'd like to focus on the traffic concerns. Route 206 is bad enough without additional residents and additional vehicle traffic. There have been several significant accidents recently involving pedestrians on the west side of town, specifically just west of University Place, that are terribly concerning. I don't think anyone has done a traffic study, and if they have, it should certainly be shared. Local government claims the road is under the state jurisdiction, so it's beyond their control. That said, locally, and especially in front of the proposed development, we need more traffic congestion measures and speed controls. The sheer volume of traffic, both and especially through traffic, is not safe for the pedestrians and cyclists who live in the immediate area. But as an aside, I won't even let my children ride their bicycles to town. That goes without commenting about the number of 18-wheelers that charge up Route 206 as though they were on I-95 with little regard for vehicles, let alone elderly, children, or pets that may be in the way. As I understand it, this project is intended to facilitate space for the elderly, the children, and smaller families. So if anything were to happen, I'd hope that at least before any plan is approved, the community deserves an in-depth traffic study, and action should be taken to change the current traffic patterns to make the area safer. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Are there any more members of the public who wish to address the board? There are no more hands raised. So seeing none go up, I will close the public comment portion of the meeting and ask, and we can revisit some of what has been raised that that does, relate back to different elements of the master plan. I do want to, I'm trying to, yeah. Mr. Head mentioned the a statement from me that was made on November 30th or around that time. I'm not sure whether it was that night but it doesn't matter. In response to a letter from the school board, and I just want to say that to me, in my view, this redevelopment plan is not comparable to the Avalon development over at the shopping center, either in bulk or scale, or certainly not design, as with the sensitivity to the surrounding historic neighborhood. But probably more important than that, I want to point out that the redevelopment area designation and the planning for this site way predates the adoption of the 2023 master plan. And that's partly why Mr. Kyle was careful to point out that this redevelopment plan is viewed as consistent with not only the master plan adopted toward the end of last year, but also previous master plans and reexamination reports. So it's not about me. I didn't want it, but I didn't want that to go without, responding in some way to the comments that he made, because it's understandable that that somebody would bring that up. So I want to revisit the question about the underground parking and whether or not that's, I know we're not looking at a site plan, and some of the issues that were raised were really related more to site plans, like site triangles and, you know, the location of crosswalks and whatnot. But I would like to hear from Mr. Kyle something about the what's anticipated with the underground parking, whether that will affect the grade of the whether the grade will be from the bottom, whether the grade will change whether these dwellings, these buildings will be on higher ground than exists on the site now. So if you could just talk a little bit about whether grading has been talked about at all, whether there are assumptions in the redevelopment plan about that, or maybe it's worthy of a suggestion that the planning board might make in its resolution when we get to that point.
Sure, I'd be happy to. So the way that building height is defined, as I said, it's a 4-story maximum. The parking is intended to be the ground level, but as probably everybody knows, this site from Stockton Street descends down the hill as you go along Hibben. So a portion of the parking garage will be more out of the ground, but the intention, at least based on the conceptual plan, is that you won't see directly into parking. On the southern side of these buildings, there will be residential units that wrap the parking level. So while a parking level is not considered a story, it's still part of overall building height. And the way that building height is calculated is a 4-corner average, but no single portion of a facade can exceed 50 feet from average grade right at the we'll say the foundation to depending on the type of roof structure, if it's a flat roof or if it's a mansard or a hip roof. So the intention is to limit height to 56 feet, but no single portion could be more than 50. And there will be residential units, as I said, that wrap the southern faces of those buildings, because that was one concern that we had all along, is that yes, we can have parking beneath the building, but we really don't want it to be visible, but it will have to be more out of grade as you go farther south. So that was a careful consideration in writing the redevelopment plan.
Okay, and can you speak a little bit to the way that the height of the building steps up from the setback to the middle of the building? Does that make sense?
Yeah, so
I guess I'm speaking to not only to overall perceived height, but also to concerns neighbors have about privacy.
Sure. So the step backs are required for the 4th story. So it will not be, in most cases, a sheer 4-story building. So there'll be a required step back from the 3rd to the 4th level. I think it's a minimum of 10 feet. We particularly wanted to be sensitive to the south, where we have single-family residential, that we didn't have a building that was looming over those single-family units. So particularly facing the southern facades, there's a setback from the property line of the building in general, but then at the 3rd story, it's required to step back, I believe it's 10 feet, so that story will be farther away from the property line. And they can have, there can be private open space there. We allow, terraces, things like that on that 4th level.
And I expect members of the public have poured over the redevelopment plan, but on pages 26 and 27, there are some diagrams that just, again, for the public, that speak to those setback descriptions that Mr. Kyle was just giving us. Can you speak to the sensitivity to and the degree to which large, mature, healthy trees on the site are being looked at and considered? Remind me, I know that the trees within the right of way, the street trees, are to be preserved, but are there buffer areas beyond that where the mature trees will not be touched, and anything beyond that?
Yeah, so there is a requirement in the redevelopment plan. There's language that says that existing mature trees should be retained. It'll largely amount to a site plan issue for the planning board when it comes in, because we don't have grading plans at this point. We don't know exactly how grade will change, where underground utilities are going to have to go, things like that. So as the board engages in review of a potential site plan in the future, those would be things that have to be discussed. There's also going to be a tree preservation plan as part of the redevelopment agreement. As Mr. Mariziti said at the outset, once the redevelopment plan is adopted and a redevelopment agreement is entered with the redeveloper, there is a tree preservation plan that is required to be submitted and must be met as part of the redevelopment agreement.
Okay.
So we kind of have two layers of control on that. You as a board will have the opportunity to review that, but then mayor and council also has the ability through the redevelopment agreement to address that issue.
Okay.
Madam Chair, if I could just jump in real quick too, just a reminder to everyone that this, if it were approved by council, certainly is not the last stop, as was mentioned with the redevelopment plan and the site plan. When this, if it was approved, returned to the board, we would have the board's whole roster of professionals, including our stormwater expert, municipal arborist, landscape architect, traffic consultant, and they would all be reviewing it at that time as well.
Right. I'm glad you brought up traffic, because that was certainly a concern raised by multiple people. Does the board have will there be a traffic impact study conducted in association with the creation of the site plan?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And I mean, one way I've thought about traffic and is that, the point of building more housing in proximity to the downtown and to transit is at least in part to make it possible for people who currently commute into town by car every day, some of them through this neighborhood, have an option to live in town and commute on foot or on a bike. That's the kind of thing that was talked about as the master plan and the bike or mobility element was being crafted. So I'm glad to hear that a traffic impact study will be done. Justin, do you remember the number? I don't have it at my fingertips. The number of commuters coming into Princeton every day versus people commuting out of Princeton by car?
So it was 24,000 people commute in every day for jobs. And just as a reminder, we're a town of 31,000. There were 3,000 people who both lived here and worked here.
Okay.
And, that's before these 1,000 apartments go up at the Princeton Junction train station in West Windsor, or, up by the shop right in Montgomery, and all those other places where they are currently going in.
Well, I hope they take the dinky.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the ones in West Windsor.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so Mr. Kyle, can you talk a little bit more about the way that the redevelopment plan speaks to historic gateways? Because that's also a concern that was mentioned more than once.
Yes, so obviously that's a concept, as I said in the presentation, that's been discussed for decades in Princeton. This is one of the key entries to, as you progress towards downtown, historically, the buildings that were there, which predated Princeton zoning ordinance, were a part of that. One of the things, some people mentioned some challenges with visibility at Hibben and Edge Hill. Part of what we wanted to do was enhance the gateway, but then address those safety issues. As I said, one of the goals of the plan was to improve, there's mention of someone that was killed in an accident. The goal was to improve pedestrian, bicyclist safety in this area, improve visibility, but then also, we all had that large green that was in front of, I think it was Tenant Hall, that we wanted to preserve a portion of that. And then also the goal is to make that usable to the community. So there was a kind of a fence that stretched along the front of that. And while it was an inviting space, it wasn't often used by the public. So that was the other part of it, was tying into the gateway theme, improving safety. Not opening up is not the right word, but some of those buildings, particularly the gymnasium, was very close to Stockton Street, which was part of the problem with visibility, to the west as you were coming up on Hibben. It's discussed in the redevelopment plan, certainly in the context of how it was characterized in the historic preservation element, and that historic gateway. But then really the ideas that I just put forth is how it's discussed in the redevelopment plan. And those were really the ideas that we worked on as we wrote the redevelopment plan.
Okay.
And Madam Chair, if you don't mind me adding to that, as has been described, redevelopment plans allow for greater flexibility when it comes to design and standards overall, and ultimately what we get. The underlying zoning has been mentioned a few times tonight. That is the E4 zoning of the former borough, which is educational. It does allow for 1 and 2 family homes, as a use, but generally, and not surprisingly, the uses are for institutions of higher learning, including, by right, a library with a surface parking lot, or a conditional use of dorms even. So there's much less flexibility when it comes to this gateway. If an institution of higher learning acquired this site or the current property owner and decided to go with what the underlying zoning would allow for with those educational uses with surface parking lots. And I think examples of those were created as part of the redevelopment area needs study a few years ago. And those might have come up during the community forums. And it's, exactly what you think it might be, of a larger building with a parking lot.
Madam Chair, if I could just add to that, I want to reinforce that point. That's one of the main features of the redevelopment process, as distinguished from proceeding as a right under the municipal land use law. So the underlying zoning, which would be superseded by this plan, would allow property owners or developers to go into the planning board as of right to implement whatever was zoned to be included in the area. And in that case, the planning board, the municipality, has very little control about design, other features, other amenities. We talked about open space, design of the buildings. All of that would be beyond the pale of what could be imposed in the approval process. The distinction with redevelopment, as I mentioned, once the redevelopment plan is adopted, a redeveloper can be designated. The redevelopment agreement is a negotiated document, an opportunity for a negotiation to sand down the difficult issues and rough spots and what would otherwise be present if an application as a right went forward. And so that's the main benefit of redevelopment, an opportunity to negotiate, which does not exist in a legal way when an application as a right comes before the planning board.
Thank you for that, Joe. So I've peppered Jim and Justin with questions. Are there issues that have not yet been addressed that planning board members would like to get to? Owen and then Claudia.
Thank you. Mr. Kyle, I'd like you to address the concern that a few people raised that the underlying zoning actually is R3 rather than E4B. Is there any validity to that, or do you know where that concept is coming from?
I'll do, and I'm gonna ask Justin to help me out here if I get it wrong, but if I remember correctly, there's permission, as Justin said, for single and two family in the E4, but it has to be based on, I think it's the R3 standards, right, Justin?
Yeah, that's exactly correct. I mean, so we're kind of getting into technicalities here, but there's one zone.
Yeah, try to dumb it down for
All right.
me.
There's one zone, and that's the E4 zone for this property. But if something were developed with 1 and 2 family homes, as is permitted, it would go by the R3 bulk standards. So, it's really one zone, but if that use were to happen, it would, go by those standards.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Owen?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Claudia?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. One of the questions that was raised by one of the callers related to they mentioned a 40-year potential phase out of the affordable housing units. And I'm reading the redevelopment plan, and I see that the affordable housing units would be, that Princeton could release the units from the affordability control requirements after 30 years.
So, yeah, there's
it also appears, just one other part of the 30 years, at a later part in the redevelopment agreement. This first comment is on page 21, and the second time the 30 years comes up is on page 37, where the redevelopment agreement has an expiry date of 30 years. And I'm just curious as to why there's a phase out of either one of those conditions or of the agreement itself.
Sure. So the current third round regulations that we're operating under, so the fourth round of affordable housing obligations doesn't actually start until July 1st of 2025. The legislature just adopted a new law that will govern, how we move forward there. But for the third round, the typical controls under the Uniform Housing Affordability Controls are 30 years for rental and for sale units. A4 that was just adopted and signed by the governor actually increases the control period for rental units to 40 years. So we're still operating under the third round. So we've utilized language that is in effect essentially now. But that could change. And as I said, we still have an unmet need number in the former borough. I know it's been reduced. I don't know by how much, but it was 195 was part of the settlement agreement, was the unmet need number. And we have had some projects built that have chipped away at that number, but not substantially. So with the controls, the way that it's typically worded now is that the controls can be released by the municipality at the end of the initial restriction period. However, most communities choose to extend them for another 30 years. And there's new language in A4, the new legislation that also addresses that. So, but currently right now, we're still in the round 3 control. So it would be 30 years, but it's the municipal right to extend those controls at the end of the control period if they desire.
If I could address the question about the duration on page 37, that's a different concept. That's not the duration of the redevelopment agreement. That's the duration of the redevelopment plan. So the redevelopment agreement will follow this, and the redevelopment agreement will not contain this provision. Typically, the redevelopment agreement will identify the project, the description, as I mentioned, and the schedule for implementation, which would be, that agreement would be implemented much sooner than 30 years. The plan stays in effect in the event that that project, the redevelopment agreement doesn't work out. There's still a plan that would support entering into a different redevelopment agreement. So they're two different points.
Thank you. Another question that doesn't come up here, and I don't know if that's in our purview, has to do with the assignability of the redevelopment agreement. Right now, I've heard Herring mentioned, and I guess he's the contractor who was looking to do this, to become the redeveloper. Will there be a provision in the agreement that allows for assignability? And if there is, would the municipality then have the right to approve the entity to whom the agreement is assigned?
I can't speak to the particular agreement here, but I can tell you that every agreement that I've seen deals with transfers. That's how the statute deals with it. And the statute requires that there be a provision regarding transfers, and every one that I have negotiated, which are many, requires the governing body to approve a transfer. There are some transfers that are permitted, such as in connection with mortgage interest and things of that sort, routine kinds of things, but you're talking about a new owner of the whole project, and that's very strictly watched, typically.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Other questions or thoughts from planning board members? Including any thoughts about making a finding with or without recommendations as to the consistency, master plan consistency. Mr. Taylor and then Mr. Boddigheimer.
Bear in mind that I was a member of the steering committee for the development of our 2023 master plan. And that allowed me not only to look forward, but to do so looking back to 1996 and the re-examination process. And out of that, it became clear to me that one of the most important development challenges in Princeton was this particular development plan. And that if we're to move forward, with a process which is in every way laid out legally and practically and very transparent, we need to approve a plan. And when I look at this plan, A, I think it's been very thoughtfully put together. B, I think it's been extremely well written. I spent time focused on the planning goals. I looked at the land use elements. And to me, given the narrow role that we have as a planning board tonight, my view is that it is consistent. I see the issues raised. I understand and empathize with many of the comments made, but what I see is a transparent, real-world process in which, as we go forward with the agreement and then with various site plan processes, as applications develop, we have a directional strategy, a plan within which to operate. And so from my point of view, we have an important but a narrow focus tonight. Is it or is it not consistent? And do we or do we not, as our chairman has indicated, have comments? I'm satisfied. I think it's consistent. And I think we've had a thorough discussion, and that will continue in a transparent way as the process of development unfolds.
Thank you, Jack. Nat Boddigheimer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Really, I just want to echo what Mr. Taylor just, everything that he said right now, and just add, I guess, my comfort with this moving forward based on my 30+ years working as a policy and planning professional in this, in this area of seeing the effects that good design can have on the kinds of outcomes that residents of the neighborhood are concerned about. I think when you draw a circle around the neighborhood, and I sort of think from a person who is thinking about sustainability outcomes and equity outcomes and transportation system outcomes, you really have to draw the circle wider than I think many of the commenters have drawn them. But I mean, the essence of my point is, living in the Washington, D.C. region from 1996 to 2012, observing firsthand the transition of the Arlington, Virginia neighborhood from a single family neighborhood along very traditional auto-oriented retail, and that corridor, the Roslyn-Ballston corridor, transitioning into an engine of economic development for the municipality of Arlington, and adding substantially to the quality of life of the single-family residential neighborhoods adjoining that corridor, north and south, while including a lot more density. The concerns about traffic increase and safety on the corridor were completely unjustified, as it turned out. Subsequent traffic studies observed, large increases in residential density with no appreciable increase in traffic volumes, and in fact, lower speeds and greater pedestrian safety. That's just one, you've lived that experience and seen that, you have confidence that the application of design tools sensitively can make this kind of community, and indeed all of the center of Princeton and the Washington Shopping Center, an enormous asset to the surrounding communities in the context of including more residents in the community. I want to observe that, look, we have a densely shaded backyard. We're not cutting, we love that. So I love tree canopy, but I mean, again, this is something I think that can be addressed with appropriate design. But I also think that when you're thinking about a sustainability perspective, I mean, again, you have to think about the equivalency of trees with automobiles, and you can look on various resources, and the Vermont Department of Environment says it's 121 trees is essentially the equivalent of removing one car from the road. And so this is one of those things where, to go to that point about the number of people who drive into Princeton who don't have the opportunity to live in Princeton, just one person driving for a year is the equivalent of 121 trees. And I don't know exactly how many mature trees it is per acre, but another source references something like 26,000 vehicle miles traveled for a full acre of trees, which is roughly 2 cars. So just eliminating 100 cars, 50 cars from driving into Princeton is it's the equivalent of a very, very substantial number of acres of tree cover. And we just have to be mindful that those trees might be preserved here, but they would be taken down somewhere else, and we would be substituting a huge amount of carbon addition to the atmosphere. So I mean, that's an additional point I guess I just I wanted to make. And I also guess I just wanted to, I just can't let it go. I mean, there's the idea of not changing the character of the campus because the community is auto-oriented now. First off, that's just sort of a shocking statement to me. The second thing is it's just in principle. Second thing, in practice, all you have to do is look at historic photographs of post-war Netherlands in the 50s and 60s, and to see it was as auto-oriented as the worst auto-oriented small suburbs of the United States. And in place after place, effective design has controlled traffic and improved the quality of life and created places that are a benefit to residents and a driver of tourism and of local business. And you just can't have your cake and eat it too on the traffic question I have another public commenter here who wants to make a very important point. Look, I'm sorry, I don't want to be mean about this, but you know, the juxtaposition of traffic being brought to a halt and a pedestrian being killed. I mean, the idea of someone being hit and killed by traffic brought to a halt is just too rich. You can't, you know, it's one thing or the other. And the reality is that slower traffic is more safe and more controllable. And I'll just return to a point that I've made in the past. I'll make it again. And even the public commenter, Felicia Spitz, made it. You know, not the same way. The population of Princeton is essentially unchanged from the 1980s and 1990s. 130,000 people have been added to the communities around Princeton. We have absolutely no control over that. Those drivers drive to our community, they drive through our community, they are heedless of our community. That is not excusing the members of our own community who are also heedless of traffic standards. That is something that happens as well. But we have the ability to control the quality of the environment in our town. And if we make it nicer for us and residents of Princeton and make it harder for people to cut through it, at least they'll drive slower. And if it's better to bike or walk than to drive, then, you know, there's really not a happier feeling than walking and riding a bike faster than cars. I mean, if you haven't done that, that's a pretty damn good feeling. So
I concur.
You know, try it out if you haven't. That's my comment. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Nat. Paula Vinuka and then Julie Capizzoli.
Thank you very much. And thank you to Mr. Kyle for a very thoughtful plan and presented here today. I may be a little bit less familiar with the redevelopment process than other members of the planning board. So we just had a couple of questions for perhaps Mr. Kyle or Mr. Lesko. I just wanted to clarify the permitted number of residential units noted here is 238. That's the maximum number. And so the final site plan or approved plan would consider could be fewer than that number. Is that correct? Okay.
Could be, yeah.
That's correct.
And I also just wanted to clarify, Mr. Kyle, how you arrived at the determinations for the setback amounts and for the height restrictions, the height limits. Was that based on analysis of the current zoning or?
No, it was based on the concept plan that was submitted. So it's essentially the plan that was unveiled in late October. We looked at that, used that as a guide. It was really a judgment of, you know, are we comfortable with the physical development plan that was presented? And it's always good to, you know, enjoy an idea or a plan and then write a redevelopment plan around it. So that's what was done here. And it was essentially a judgment on that redevelopment, not just by me, but by others as well. And we were comfortable with it. So we used that as the basis for establishing the required setbacks.
Okay. Thank you.
Julie?
I just wanted to thank my colleagues for their comments, especially Mr. Taylor and his involvement with the subcommittee on the master plan. And I think if we are honing in on our obligation to look at both the previous master plan and the master plan approved in 2023, I think we have to agree that this really does work in the spirit of that, and that this type of housing is definitely a core part of what we approved, and that moving forward, having this design review process, site review process, is what essentially will create, you know, what the end product. So the public involvement, especially of the neighbors and the neighborhood, is essential as we move forward. But I do think that this is definitely in keeping with what we approved in 2023. So Thanks,
Thank,
everyone.
thank you, Julie. Sorry, I took a minute to unmute myself. Other board comments, thoughts? I think that I would like to include in our, I mean, based on what I'm hearing, I think we are moving toward a finding of consistency with the master plan. And I would like to add a recommendation or two. The first being that the planning board encourages council to pay keen attention to preserving as many healthy mature trees on site as possible, including beyond street trees and beyond buffer areas. And that replacement trees be native species, at least 70% or some large percent, the majority, that will grow large at maturity and add canopy. Because I do think, I take your point, Mr. Bodenheimer, about relative value of trees. I think the value of trees for cooling and cleaning the air, for absorbing stormwater, for you know, and beyond carbon sequestration is my point, and just for
Totally agree.
their beauty and
Totally
their
agree.
beneficial impact on mental health, all these things.
Oh,
The older I get, the more magical I consider trees to be. And so
Louise,
I
also
think it would
from
be,
an environmental standpoint, obviously,
yeah,
I mean, certainly we would be really, well, I would be, and I think the environmental community
yeah,
is very
yeah. So,
aware about
and
that.
I'm sure, I know how high a value council places on trees. I don't think this in any way imposes, you know, suggests that they, I think, you know, if it helps to give council leverage in pushing for absolute maximum tree preservation, that is something I'd like to help them, or for our board to help them to do. And then one other recommendation might be to encourage council to be especially mindful of grading plans, such that there is as little regrading of the site as possible. The more regrading you do, the more you expose, you know, the more you turn over topsoil and other things that, not other things. It makes it much harder for the site to support trees and vegetation. The more regrading, the more compaction, you know, the more destruction of the top layer of soil. So I think that is worth, again, just asking them to be particularly mindful of. Are there any other thoughts that people have about the should I read, or Joe, do you want to read the resolution that you
I can do
prepared?
that.
I'd be
If
happy to. Okay, go
you
right.
want to listen to me.
Yeah,
It's
yes.
entitled Resolution of the Princeton Planning Board, Mercer County, New Jersey.
Read the version that is consistent with the.
Yes, I'm getting that sense.
Right,
One that
okay.
contains places to fill in recommendations from what I'm hearing you say. So it is resolution regarding consistency of proposed ordinance number 2024-30 with master plan. Whereas on July 8th, 2024, the mayor and council of the municipality of Princeton referred proposed ordinance number 2024-30 and a redevelopment plan dated July 1, 2024, entitled Redevelopment Plan for the Princeton Theological Seminary Properties for the real properties within the redevelopment study area designated as Block 35.01, lots 25, 26, and Block 36.01, lots 15, 16, and 17. the redevelopment plan for its review and recommendations by this planning board pursuant to the redevelopment law within 45 days of the referral. And whereas NJSA 48:12A-7D of the redevelopment law requires a planning board to determine whether all provisions of the redevelopment plan are either substantially consistent with the municipal master plan or are designed to effectuate the master plan. And whereas NJSA 48:12A-7E of the redevelopment law provides that the planning board shall transmit its report to the governing body containing its recommendations concerning the redevelopment plan, which shall include the identification of any provisions of the proposed redevelopment plan which are inconsistent with the master plan, and any recommendation concerning any inconsistency and any other matters the board desires or deems appropriate. And whereas the Princeton Planning Board has reviewed the aforesaid ordinance and redevelopment plan and considered the matter at a public meeting held by the board on July 18, 2024, be it resolved, one, that the proposed ordinance number 2024-30 and the redevelopment plan is substantially consistent with the Princeton Master Plan, Princeton Master Plan, Boroughs Master Plan, and Reexamination Report adopted on November 30, 2023, as well as the 1996 Princeton Community Master Plan and Reexamination Reports adopted in 2021, 2001, I should have said, 2007, and 2017. Two, that it is the recommendation of the planning board that ordinance number 24-30 and the redevelopment plan be adopted in its current form without revision. It is the recommendation of the recommendation of the planning board that the following recommendations be made for consideration by the governing body. And then finally, that this resolution shall be submitted to the municipal clerk promptly after adoption. Be it further resolved that this resolution shall be effective immediately. And so going back to what you mentioned, Madam Chair, the area to include your recommendations would be after paragraph 2.
Okay, I do have one, I think, correction, and I'm sorry that I didn't mention this when I was looking at it this afternoon, but in paragraph 1, after be it resolved, the second line, well, I'll read it leading up. The redevelopment plan is substantially consistent with the Princeton, it should read, with the Princeton Community Master Plan and Reexamination Report adopted on November 30th, 2023. So there's some extra words in there.
I see what you're saying. I apologize for that.
But that's all right. It just was probably, well, who knows? It happens to all of us.
And Louise, you could drop community from there, the title of it, Princeton Master Plan, since we've consolidated.
Okay. So are members of the board okay with adding a recommendation such as I read, or two, such as I read before about tree protection and about attention to grading? They're saying, okay. So I propose the first one to read period, the planning board encourages council to pay keen attention to preserving as many healthy mature trees as possible, including beyond street trees and buffer areas, and for replacement trees to be native species, most of which will grow large at maturity and add tree canopy. And B, encourage council to be mindful of grading on site such that finished grade, well, grading on site and minimize regrading that impacts topsoil.
So moved with
Maybe not
recommendations.
perfect, maybe not perfect language, but they'll get the gist. And again, the point being to give them, you know, leverage, not to tie their hands, because I think that this kind of thing that council members, you know, want to make sure happens too.
Again, so moved with the recommendations.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
Moved by Mr. McGowan, seconded by Nat Bodegheimer. Carrie, would you give us a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Bodegheimer,
Yes.
Ms. Capizoli,
Yes.
Mr. McGowan,
Yes.
Ms. Nuka,
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Yes.
Ms. Perlmutter,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Ms. Wilson Anderson,
Yes.
and Mrs. Wilson.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thanks, everybody. Joe, thank you so much. Your
I've enjoyed
wise
you all.
counsel, so valuable tonight. We really, really appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you again when the next
you.
redevelopment project is before us.
I enjoyed the conversation and the comments and the wise and prudent conclusions. So
Thank you.
I'll leave you now. You have other work
Yep.
to do, and I'll get out of your way.
Okay.
Good evening. all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Chair Wilson,
I know it's time to take a break. Is that what you were?
No,
gonna
no,
say,
no.
Joe?
I was going to say, can we just explain to Miss Vieira why we're not allowing her to speak again?
Oh,
She
well,
raised her
public-
hand twice and I lowered
I
it and
see.
she raised it again.
Yeah,
So,
we hear public comment once from, you know, we allow people to speak once and she had her time, I believe. And so then we ended public comment when no hands were, you know, no further hands were raised, even though, you know, even after multiple requests to raise hands if anybody wanted to say anything. So I'm sorry if she had more to say, and but we did hear comments from her, and I want to thank everybody who attended to observe, and certainly everyone who addressed the board tonight. And I hope that much of our conversation subsequent to your comments addressed at least most of the issues that were raised. If not to your satisfaction, then at least in some reasonably thorough manner. So we will, it's 9:04. Whoever's in charge of reaching out to Jerry Muller should do so. And we'll take a break. Mr. Bodegheimer, do you want to?
Yeah, I just
Oh,
wanted to say that
you're conflicted, right?
I just wanted to let you know I
Okay.
would not be returning after the break.
Okay,
And I believe that would go for Ms. Nuka as well.
Yes, that's right.
right. Okay. But we still have a quorum, right?
That's correct. 7.
Okay. All right, so it's 9:04. I'll see everyone at 9:14 or 9:15 at the very latest. All right. Thanks. See you
Good night,
soon.
all.
Bye.
Let's get it rolling again, Carrie. Thanks, everybody, for your patience. We have up next an application from the trustees of Princeton University. This is a really, excuse me, relief of condition at the Art Museum for tree relocation. This is at Elm Drive and McCosh Walk, block 45.01, lot 101. And this is file number P2424-479RC.
And Madam Chair,
Great. Oh,
the notice is proper, and Carrie, can you confirm that the service was sufficient?
yes, I can confirm that.
Okay, then proof of publication and service are in order. and the board has jurisdiction.
Good, excellent. Thank you.
Okay.
Anything to say, Justin, before we turn to Mr. DeGrazia? No?
I have one thing to say. I don't know if Mr. Weissman wants to introduce it or just turn directly to Mr. DeGrazia. And Jerry, you might need to swear me in for saying that.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Let's swear
Can you
you
raise
and
your right
Dan
hand?
Weissman in at the same time.
Is Dan here?
Yes, he is.
Okay, you both swear or affirm that testimony about to give will be the truth.
Yes, I do.
All right, so sworn and affirmed.
Great. Thanks, Justin. Dan? Anything?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, good evening, everybody. I can briefly run through the memo if needed, but I know the applicant has a presentation prepared for tonight. But I'll try to be as brief as possible. The applicant was granted preliminary and final site plan approval in 2021, which consisted of construction of a new art museum. There was a condition associated with that application that detailed the quantity of required replacement trees. A portion of those trees were going to be planted off-site on Poe Field, which was detailed in that condition. The off-site plantings was subject to the review of the municipal arborist. The applicant is requesting relief of this condition to change the location from Poe Field to Elm Drive to the southwest and Russell Walk to the southeast adjacent to Washington Road. The arborist has reviewed the locations and prepared a report. Unfortunately, he couldn't be here tonight, but he has no objection to the revised locations. And subsequent to staff issuing the reports, the applicant advised that additional trees had to be removed on the site, which required additional replacements. So the quantities of noted in the relief of condition would also have to be revised. Those have also been reviewed with the arborist, who also takes no objection, and I also take no objection to those modifications. With that, I would turn it back to you, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Dan? Mr. DeGrazia, welcome.
Thank you. Appreciate it. For the record, my name is Christopher DeGrazia from the law firm of Fagery, Drinker, Biddle, and Reith, here on behalf of the applicant, trustees of Princeton University. It's a very simple application this evening for an amendment of a condition of approval. The trees actually have already been planted about a year and a half ago, maybe a little longer. But unfortunately, the way that the condition was drafted had a specific location, which was Poe Field. After the initial approval, Poe Field became the subject of other applications where we were putting in stormwater management and geo-exchange wells, so it wasn't really an appropriate location. And the new locations are extremely beneficial from an ecological benefit. It really helps to reinforce woodland buffers along Elm and Russell Walk, and helps with the creation of habitat. We're talking about all native trees. So we thought it was a really nice opportunity to plant in those locations. So we're here tonight just to request relief to change that condition of approval to update the tree replacement number from 63 to 67, and to change specifically the location from around Poe Field to along Elm Drive and Russell Walk. We have a very short presentation, and unless you have any questions, I'd like to introduce our first witness.
Christopher, let me
So-
go ahead, Madam Chair.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that if you're, however many witnesses you're going to have, let's swear everyone in, and then you can and then we'll qualify people as they, right before each of them testifies.
Right, to the extent they're giving expert testimony.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah.
Christopher, how many people do you have?
We have two, basically.
Okay, if both of you, I'm going to swear both in. If you can raise your right hands. Do you swear or affirm that testimony about to give will be the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and please state your full name, spell your last name.
My name is Tom Bishop, B-E-S-S-H-O.
Okay, thank you.
And Aaron Feldman, F-E-L-D-M-A-N.
Okay, Thank you very much.
May I share my screen for the presentation slides?
Yes, and I want to also qualify you.
All right.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about your expertise and your licensing?
Sure. I'm a director at Field Operations, landscape architecture firm based in New York. I have a Bachelor of Agriculture from University of Tokyo and a Master of Landscape Architecture from University of Pennsylvania. I've been practicing landscape architecture over 18 years, and I'm registered in New Jersey as well as in Pennsylvania.
And you've presented before this board before, correct?
Yes, I did.
We offer him as an expert.
Great. Thank you. We accept your qualifications.
Thank you.
We have a very short presentation. I believe it's something like 13 slides. If we can mark that in as Exhibit A1.
Yep, we'll do that electronically.
Can everyone see my screen now?
Yes, we can. If you could just, as you go through the slides,
Right.
identify the slide number as you go.
Sure. So this is actually slide 1, just the title page. And as Christopher just mentioned, I will walk you through the updates we made for the tree replacement for the art museum project. This is actually slide 2. And this is slide 3. This is the original tree removal plan showing the trees to be removed with the red X. And the trees to be transplanted with the blue triangle, and the trees to remain with just the black dot here. And this is the original tree replacement schedule. And as you can see, 63 trees were required to be planted, and we had proposed to plant 35 trees on site and 28 trees off site, just because the area where we can plant the trees within the site was very limited.
Okay, if you could identify what slide you're on as you go.
Sorry, this is slide 4.
Yep.
Yes. The slide 5, this is the updated tree removable plan. So the additional trees removed during the construction are highlighted in yellow, along with the tree ID number in green here. And the tree 33, this tree here, was removed because it was too close to the building, and then keeping the tree conflict with the construction work for the this facade. And then the tree 61A, 61B, 86, these were removed again due to the similar construction conflict. And also these trees appeared stressed and were not in good condition when they were cut down. And this is slide 6, updated tree replacement schedule. So the with 4 additional trees removed, now 67 trees were 67 trees needs to be planted, and the number of the trees we are planting on site remain the same, 35 trees. And the number of the trees that we are planting off site has been increased from 28 to 32. And we are actually, we will discuss this in details in a bit, but we actually planted 40 trees off-site, just to go beyond the requirement.
And Mr. Tesho, you're talking about this schedule.
Yes.
That came after the approval by the board of the art museum tree planting plan, correct?
This schedule, yes.
Okay.
But this schedule was already submitted to the town. This is the original version.
Yeah, the original is on slide 4, Jerry. And the new one is on slide 6.
Slide 7.
7.
Sorry, slide 6. Sorry, slide 6.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And just to clarify, that was, when we say the original, that was the one that was approved during compliance review. And
Okay,
in the
good.
final plan, the original resolution doesn't have the correct numbers. And
Right.
unfortunately, I didn't clarify that when I submitted the application and request
Okay.
the amendment of the condition. So what we're showing you is the compliance set and now changes to that compliance set to update it a little bit more.
Okay. Thank you.
And now I'd like to turn over to Aaron Feldman with University to speak to the offsite tree planting details.
Thank you, Stone. Do I need to qualify myself as well?
Yeah, well, what is your, you're more of a fact witness. What is your expertise or title?
So I'm the capital project manager for landscape within Princeton University's Office of Capital Project. I'm a licensed landscape architect in New Jersey and Maryland. I've been practicing for 21 years.
Christopher, just to be on the safe side, why don't you quickly qualify?
Okay, so I guess we can qualify as a landscape architect.
If you could just say a word or two about your education.
So I hold a bachelor's in landscape architecture from Penn State University.
Great. We accept your qualifications. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So
we're starting on slide 8, just for the record. Yeah.
7, yes.
7.
And then
which
this is
just the
8.
title.
Yep.
Yeah. Slide
Yep.
8.
So slide 8 shows Poe Field, which is the original location of the offsite tree replanting in relation to the Puam site, which you see just to the north, labeled in white. Initially, this is where the offsite trees were proposed to be planted. And at the time we were proposing that, there was in design a regional subsurface stormwater system and a geoexchange bore field that was also being designed beneath Poe Field. At the time, we had thought that there was going to be space on the western side of Poe Field to add additional trees to cover what would have gone on the Puam site. As design progressed with Poe Field, with the geoexchange bore field, and with the stormwater management system, we realized some opportunities to expand both systems to get better value and better opportunity to collect stormwater and to further our geoexchange goals. And we also pushed the construction time frame, which was originally 2022 and 2023. We pushed the construction of Poe Field out a year. So it is currently under construction. It's wrapping up construction this fall. So the thinking at the time was originally that we would be able to wrap the installation of the trees in with the geoexchange work and the construction going on there. But as I said, as design progressed and we enlarged the system, the space for tree planting within Poe Field became extremely constrained as a factor of the layout of the geoexchange bores and the stormwater management. If you go to the next slide, please. This slide 9, shows the Elm Drive and Russell Walk, the two locations where our offsite trees we have planted in relation to the Puam site. So you can see it just in the south and to the east and west of Poe Field. So we identified these two areas as the woodland buffers along 2 roads on either side of the central core of Princeton's campus. We realized a number of benefits to planting them here instead of Poe Field. First of all, the ecological benefits of planting these native species within gaps of the wooded buffer would further enhance that wooded buffer, as Mr. DeGrazia said, providing additional habitat, providing additional food source, and having just more general visual buffers in that area. The additional benefit is that we were able to plant these in November and December of 2022, nearly 2 years earlier than we would have been able to plant them on Poe Field. If you go to the next slide, please. So this shows slide 10. This shows where the trees along Russell Walk have been planted. In this slide, north is pointing towards the right. You can see Washington Road along the middle of the page. Stryker Bridge forms that X on the right-hand side. And then just above Washington Road, you can see the path of Russell Walk, which is a natural surface trail that runs uphill and to the west of Washington Road. The trees that you see in red are what we planted interspersed in the existing canopy of that wooded walk. If you go to the next slide, please, Stone. Slide 11 shows the species size and quantity of each of the trees. As you can see, these are all native trees planted within the canopy, underneath the canopy of the existing woodland edge along there. Slide 12 is a view of the Elm Drive planting area. Again, north is to the right. You can see Elm Drive at the top of the screen with the guard booth is that kind of teardrop shape. And then at the bottom of the screen is the new residential colleges development that was recently opened in the past couple of years. This image, you can see a lot of the existing trees are the dashed circles, and then those in red are the new ones that we interspersed in there to reinforce that wooded buffer. If you go to slide 13, please. This is the species size and distribution of those trees.
Thank you, Aaron.
That's a nice variety.
Thank you. These were all available. The reason it was over and above the count is really it was the available space within both of those two areas, as well as all of these trees came from our own nursery on campus, and these were trees that needed to be planted sooner rather than later, just because of the size that they were at the time of planting.
And that, I believe, wraps up our direct testimony. For the condition itself, just for clarity, it reads, the current plan requires 63 replacement trees. That would be, we're requesting that it be updated to reflect the correct amount, so requires 67 replacement trees rather than 63. There are 35 rather than 39 trees to be planted on site due to the site constraints. And instead of 24 trees off-site, 32 trees will be planted off-site. We actually planted 40 to satisfy that 32 tree requirement, and the schedules here actually show the 40 trees as testified tonight. Then the second sentence also requires a change. It reads, the off-site trees will be native shade trees located, and then we would like to delete around Poe Field and substitute that with along Elm Drive and Russell Walk. And we've already had almost 2 years of growth on these, and all the work has already been done. We're just now going back to update the condition to reflect that.
And Christopher, can one of your experts comment on the comments made in the report from Taylor Saperdor, who's the arborist, in which he says it's recommended that plantings not occur within the understory canopies of the Norway maples along Russell Walk. And he gives a reason why. Of course, this occurred quite a bit after the trees had already been planted, which is an oddity in itself, but be that as it may. Could somebody comment on whether some of the plantings have been within the understory canopies of the Norway maples?
Yeah, so I can respond
Sure.
to that. The Norway maple canopy is dispersed throughout Russell Walk, and it is dense and it is dark. And previous efforts to plant in those understory areas have been, I'm going to say, with mixed results. So we did avoid those areas, and we placed the planting really where there were gaps within the canopy, to allow for these trees to come and fill that canopy in, as opposed to trying to underplant with the Norway maples. Ideally, we would love to be able to get something to survive under the Norway maples so that they could come in for when those trees do die. Norway maples are typically fairly short-lived as far as canopy trees go, and they are considered invasive.
Okay. And just the one other comment in Mr. Saperdor's report about, due to the presence of beech leaf disease in Princeton, and proposed American beech shall be substituted with native shade trees less susceptible to insect and disease. Could you comment on that?
Sure. We did have, oh, sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think, and Aaron, you could talk about your conversation, but there's only 3 of them, and we are 8 above. So even if we don't include those, we would still be 5. We would still have 5 additional trees than what the requirement would be. I think he, you know, when the municipal arborist put together the report, he didn't realize that they had been already planted, you know, a year and a half ago.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
Aaron-
Well,
that's
one can't blame him for not knowing.
yeah, Aaron, did
I
you have
mean, I
anything else?
appreciate that you're
Yeah.
putting everything right here. I do, you know, I do recognize and appreciate that, but it is way after the fact. So,
Yeah.
but are the beech trees, are you finding beech disease in these or other trees? Is
We
it
have
becoming a
not
problem on
seen.
campus?
No, we have not yet seen it on campus. We are very aware of the beach disease, and it's frankly a little terrifying.
Yeah.
But it's a little bit less scary than it was 2 years ago when we thought it was imminent and going to wipe everything out the way emerald ash borer did with the ash. So far so good, but it's still being watched closely. And as far as I know, there are a lot of folks making efforts into researching ways to prevent it. But I don't believe that there is a treatment for it yet.
Yeah.
But we're still watching it closely.
Okay. Questions from board members for, well, are you finished with your presentation? I'm sorry, I don't mean to.
We are.
Yes.
Okay. Questions for Mr. Feldman, or now I'm missing. Did Mr. Besho leave, or am I just not?
I'm here. I'm here.
Oh, there you are. Sorry.
No problem.
Thanks.
Just 2 cents. I had a conversation with an arborist today, and there is a phosphite soil treatment for the beech that's being used as well as an antifungal, but it's the beech trees are a lot more sensitive than the ash, so it's hard to inject them, but there are some treatments coming up. But anyway.
Yeah, there's a lot of promise in the research, but I don't think there's been a lot of time. You know, it's only been around for what, 3 years now, so we don't know how long lasting those treatments are yet.
Yeah.
Other questions or comments for the applicant or experts? If there are none, I will invite public comment. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the board about this application. If you would like to do so for up to 3 minutes, now is the time to raise your hand. We have 8 attendees in the observation lounge. I'm not seeing any hands go up. Going once, going twice. Anybody wish to speak? Nope. So I will close public comment and invite any final comments from board members, questions, thoughts, motions.
I'll make a motion to approve the changes.
So this is to approve the relief of condition for the Art Museum tree relocation. Okay, moved by Julie Capizzoli, seconded by, I saw Mr. Taylor and Mr. Donald at the same time.
Go
ahead, you take it.
Okay.
As part of that, as part of that motion, you are moving that condition that Christopher read be replaced with the revised one with the different numbers and a different location of the trees.
Correct.
Yep. Okay.
So great, thank you. Moved by Julie Capizzoli, seconded by John Taylor. Carrie, would you give us a roll call vote, please?
Ms. Capizzoli,
Yes.
Mr. McGowan,
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell,
Yes.
Ms. Perlmutter,
Yes.
Mr. Taylor,
Yes.
Ms. Wilson Anderson,
Yes.
Mrs. Wilson.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for hanging in. I'm delighted that we got this done tonight and before 9:45.
I was getting nervous.
I was not entirely optimistic myself, before the meeting started, but anyway, so thank you all. And our next meeting of the
Thank you.
board is September, what, 6th?
5th.
September 5th. So enjoy the rest of the dog days. And with Mr. Cohen not attending tonight, would someone like to move adjournment?
I will make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mr. O'Donnell. Is there a second?
I'll second. And
Seconded by,
I just want to thank the university for planting all those trees. I mean, you guys plant so many trees. It's an incredible benefit to our community, and we appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
it really, really is. And you pay a lot of attention to whether they survive and thrive. And that is a very big deal. So thank you for your good work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. All in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
Aye.
Thanks, everybody.
All right.
See you around.
Yes.
Have a good night.